Hi, my name is Krista Maxim, and today I'm going to give you a presentation on communication. In this presentation, we will be working on communication in the workplace. But before we get started, let's take a step back. Previously, we discovered that engaged employees increase effectiveness in an organization. Let's review what an employee engagement means. Employee engagement is a positive, fulfilling, work-related state of mind characterized by vigor, dedication, and absorption by the article organizational effectiveness as a function of employee engagement. Engaged people employ and express themselves physically, cognitively, and emotionally during work role performances. In driving employee engagement, the expanded role of internal communication, it states the importance of engaged employees. One way to have engaged employees is to improve internal communication. Internal communication promotes, motivates superior services, knowledge, and skills about a job that makes employees want to advocate on their employer's behalf, which then makes the organization's reputation improve. Consequently, how do we have effective communication skills? In this presentation, we will look at barriers that may cause ineffective communication, policies to put in place to have effective communication, and the importance of transparency and openness in communication. Lastly, we will take a look at how to communicate the good and the bad. As stated by Conrad in the Workplace Communication Problems, the 5 functions of management are planning, organizing, staffing, leading, and controlling, which are all dependent on communication. Number 1, identifying barriers. If I had you guess what the number 1 ability people thought made a successful manager was, what would you guess? Positivity, support, incentives, people skills? The answer, according to the Workplace Communication Problems, Inquiries by Employees and Applicable Solutions, was the ability to communicate in an effective way. Not just shouting, but actually effectively, was identified as the most important skill for a manager. So why is it that most employees and managers feel that communication in the workplace is not successful? One barrier could be the mum effect, explained by Jeremy E. Beakley in his article, Supervisor-Subordinate Communication, Workplace Bullying, and the Triangle Mum Effect, as the tendency for communicators to feel a sense of guilt in association with bad news delivered to a message recipient. They would rather stay quiet than deliver bad news. This leads to subordinates who believe they cannot communicate with supervisors effectively, inhibit organizational innovation, and, particularly for the knowledge worker, work in a less satisfying career, meaning employees feel unenthusiastic at work and do not want to go up and beyond with their work. Another barrier to overcome is vocabulary. Though the outcome will most likely be the same, asking an employee rather than telling them will lead to mutual respect in communication. Look inside your company and see if you can identify some barriers that might be in the way of effective communication. Second, we're going to look at structure and policy. In the International Journal of Research, it states that when a clear structure exists, people perform better, tasks are divided, and productivity is increased. Employees like structure policy because that gives them guidelines at work. A policy that I'm going to introduce you to is the open door policy. This is used at McLean Food Service, and I have seen firsthand the benefits of this policy. The key is to always be willing to listen. This will lead to employees helping to identify and solve work-related problems because their managers listen to them. At McLean, all of the office doors are open, unless a meeting or something confidential is happening in that office, which then will be closed for the privacy of those people. Our open door policy states, first, a teammate should bring issues of concern to their immediate supervisor. Next, if that teammate is not satisfied with their response for whatever reason, that teammate should then bring their concern to either HR or their supervisor's supervisor. That next step is, if a teammate is still concerned, then they can continue to advance concern through the leadership channels up to the division president and general manager. This method is continued all the way up to the corporate office. This open door policy is introduced to every single new member at orientation. That means the whole company knows that they can voice their opinions, concerns to anyone in the company and be heard. This policy is a great way to set a standard of good communication and good listening practices. Next, we will look at transparency and openness. Managers need to set the tone for employees. Conrad references organizational grapevine as a common form of communication at work. That is why when you are communicating to an employee, you should be giving valid information and not withholding anything back, because then the employee will not have to go to fellow coworkers and ask them for the information. A quote from Conrad's article depicts just how important it is for communication to be transparent and have openness. A well-organized workplace features openness and transparency throughout the levels of the company, so that everyone is clear about his role and purpose at work and how it affects the others at work. It affects the whole team when they do not have open communication with one employee. Also, transparency is important because it can engage employees in the organization's priorities. That is what the article Driving Employee Engagement states. The article also states that they believe when a direct manager is the one being transparent, it is better received from the employees. They explored what trusted companies have in common, and that is that they treat their employees well and are openly sharing information. Lastly, we're going to learn how to communicate the good and the bad news. Mishra, Byton, and Mishra say that communication is a two-way exchange of information. Employee to manager, manager to manager, employee to employee. To be effective as a two-way exchange, both employees and managers need to listen to one another. Regular face-to-face communication is very important because face-to-face communication is a combination of information and interaction. This is a valuable technique for providing credible communication. Why? Because face-to-face interactions provide us with verbal cues and visuals that we don't see in an email or over the phone. It completes our understanding of the information being shared. The results of face-to-face communication are twofold. It will keep your employees informed and will also help them feel secure in the company because the information is coming from their boss. Communication should be both formal and informal and at all levels in an organization. I say good morning to each employee I run into on my way to the desk. I ask them how their weekends were, and I like to know what's going on in their life so that I can talk to them about it. Now, the hard part, how to communicate bad news. The process that I'm going to discuss is called the bad news sandwich by organizational psychologist David G. Jahovich. The key with the bad news sandwich is to start off positive, then deliver the bad news, and then end with a positive. Now, let's take a hypothetical. Now, let's review this technique with a hypothetical. Let's say that a teammate is doing poorly and you need to communicate that to them. With a bad news sandwich, you would start off with the positive. Tell them that you value their work and what they are doing positively at work. Then deliver the bad news by saying what performance is lacking and why you believe it is lacking. Then go on to a positive and tell them that you are there for them and that you will support them and help them improve in that area. Conrad states that you should show respect and concern for the employee by being open and honest while delivering the news. To conclude this presentation, we have reviewed the 4 ways to improve communication at an organization, thus creating engaged employees who will positively affect an organization's effectiveness. Make sure to identify what your company's personal barriers might be, either the mum effect or it could be vocabulary, telling instead of asking. After you do identify those barriers, figure out a good structure or policy for your organization to have After you do identify those barriers, figure out a good structure or policy that will promote effective communication flow for the whole organization. Make sure that you are being transparent and open. Make sure that communication is face-to-face, informal and formal. And lastly, make sure that you use the techniques from the bad news sandwich. Be positive, deliver bad news, end with a positive. I hope through my communication presentation, you have the tools to have great communication skills. Thank you.